My name is James Thompson. I work with Cullen International, and I'm the facilitator for this regulators panel under the heading, What Have Regulators Done? Now, I chaired the same session at the previous conference in October 2013. At that time, the accessibility study hadn't been released, and we've heard a lot in the first panel about that study, and it seems that Europe as a whole doesn't score too well in comparison to some other leading industrialized nations. So that's one thing I'd like to pick up on in this panel. And the other thing is the mixed picture in terms of practice by regulators in implementing the EU rules. The EU rules fall under two broad headings: obligations under the universal service obligation that apply just to specifically designated telecom companies, and another heading, obligations for equal access and choice, that apply to all telecom providers in Europe. And how regulators at national level have been implementing obligations under those two different headings seems to vary. So I hope we can pick out some interesting examples from the panel of speakers this morning. We have speakers from European Commission DG Connect and communications regulators in 3 national markets: UK, Ireland, and Romania. And so without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker to make her presentation, Andrea from DG Connect.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to say it's a pleasure for me and for the Commission as well to see you all in such great numbers, to see that, okay, I mean, the legal, I'm going to talk about the EU legal framework for the electronic communications, what's in there for the disabled users. Of course, this is just a framework, but all the work is in the, is with you at national level, with the regulators, with the manufacturers, with organizations. So I'm going to try not to take too much time because bits and pieces have been already said here and there. So without further ado, I'm just going to mention briefly the revision of the EU telecoms framework, because that was really kind of an important milestone where the 5 directives have been revised, and we know that the implementation deadline was already in 2011. So a lot of time has been passed already to be able to see the results, and that's why it's great that we are here, that we can share how the framework has been implemented, what has been pinpointed as good practice, so that we can share and we can all learn. Of course, from the 5 directives, the most important two to mention is, of course, the Universal Service Directive, which deals with universal service and end-user rights. So there are bits and pieces in the universal service provisions, there are bits and pieces in the end-user rights. And of course, we have to mention also the Framework Directive, which is a sort of an umbrella directive for the framework that really now, with the revision, included the policy for disabled end users there. I'm just going to mention briefly the universal service concept. Of course, we know that universal service exists in different fields. In the telecoms, it means that it's really a safety net of minimum services defined at EU level that have to be available to all at an affordable price. So it revolves really around 3 principles, which is, we call it 3 A's, which is availability, accessibility, and affordability. For universal service provision, the obligations could be set only to the designated undertakings, so it's not for all providers, but only just for those particular ones. For universal service, we can set quality of service. And with this, we can set measures for disabled end users. The financing means for universal service is 2 ways, or perhaps 3 ways. It either comes from sector, it either comes from the public financing, or you can have a mix of both. And of course, I should mention also that universal service is not just set in stone. It has to be revised or reviewed basically every 3 years. I will get to that later on because we are just now starting reflections on the new review of universal service. I will mention, with universal service, I will mention the mandatory provisions. There are 2 kind of sets of provisions that relate to disabled end users within universal service part. There are the measures that are mandatory, and there are measures that could be a part of universal service but are not mandatory in a strict sense. So in a way, member states or the NRAs can do things, but it's not. There won't be an infringement in a way if these measures are not taken in place. So the mandatory provisions, and that is really a change from the previous 2002 package. There has to be an equivalent access and affordability of publicly available telephony services over the connection provided at a fixed location, and also equivalent access and affordability of comprehensive directories and directory inquiry services. Other measures that could be imposed onto the designated undertakings under universal service would be measures allowing disabled end users to take advantage of the choice of undertakings. There could be measures allowing accessibility of public payphones. And basically, either the member states or the NRAs can assess at national level, according to the national circumstances, whether there's a need and design specific particular measures to allow this. Another batch of rules relate to the kind of other chapter of the Universal Service Directive, which are the end user rights. Now, bits and pieces related to provisions for disabled end users are scattered around. I've tried to kind of batch them together so that you have a bit of a better picture. So there's one set of rules that relate to transparency and publication of information. So basically, this allows the NRAs to set different set of requirements related to information for disabled end users, for quality of service, to allow comparing and allow better access to services and better choice. Now, again, these requirements can be placed on all operators, but it is a possibility for the NRA. So in a way, all of these measures are enablers. So it's in a way a call for action. The framework is there. The NRAs should be allowed to do that, and it's up to them to make their choice and do the work, basically. There's another set of rules that deals with harmonized numbers, and first and foremost is, of course, the single European emergency number 112. So basically, there should be, and now this is of a stronger nature. This is an obligation. There should be an equivalent access for disabled end users to emergency services. Also, to allow them to use these services while traveling. There's also a provision for the harmonized 116 numbers. You know, there's a few of them. So basically, NRAs or member states can make measures to allow usage of these 116 numbers for disabled users when traveling. And it's not really well placed on this slide, but there are also some within the must carry obligations. The NRAs can impose some measures to allow, or the member states can impose some measures to allow transmission of complementary services to allow accessibility for the disabled end users. Now, I think this one is the most important slide, because this is in a way a sort of a little revolution of the new package, because the infamous Article 23A that deals with equivalent access and choice. So this really allows the NRAs to impose requirements on all undertakings, so not just as opposed to universal service, not just the designated one, but for all, to really allow, to go for two aims: to allow access to electronic communication services that is equivalent to those enjoyed by the other end users. So we're talking about functionality of access, and also to impose measures that would increase the benefit from choice of undertakings for the disabled end users. So we're talking here measures, consumer protection requirements such as equivalent terms, or fair pricing, so that even if, for example, the service is a bit more costly, disabled end users enjoy the same pricing as the rest of the users. Of course, one of the important parts of the Article 23A is the terminal equipment, where the member states have the obligation to encourage availability of terminal equipment, so that better end-to-end solutions for disabled are in place, and more incentives are given to the industry to actually come up with new solutions. There has been a lot said already about the reports here and there. So of course, when we talk about the implementation developments, there has been ongoing work of BEREC in the field of telecoms for the dissemination of good practice for the disabled end users. So this work has in a way started as far as the new package goes. Started in 2011 when the first report was published, when it was trying to help member states in their preparation work for the transposition of the revised framework. And now we see that the work continues also within this workshop, and a new updated report is going to be published. There's also been, as it was already discussed in the first panel, a study monitoring e-accessibility from 2009 to 2011. This was dealing mostly with web accessibility, which is still in the digital area, but a little bit further out from the telecoms framework. But then the newest, latest 2013 study included also a part on the telecoms. Now, a lot has been said already on the content of the report. I just would like to mention perhaps the conclusions. There could be perhaps 4 main conclusions, and that is that the revision of the framework in 2009 brought some good developments, brought some advancements at national level, but still, of course, there's a lot to cover. The work has not been finished. There's a lot of granularity. There are a lot of differences between the member states. So the work has not been kind of, going in one flow. And also, perhaps the 4th remark, and perhaps one of the most important ones, that the most successful measures have been those that have been the most detailed ones. So it's not just a kind of general obligation, but the NRA sets out exactly what the rules are, what should be done, what should be achieved, and this helps to actually bring results. In my last slide, I should also mention, as I was saying at the beginning, the Commission is now really working on, or starting to reflect on, how to revise and refit the current regulatory framework. So we are now at the beginning of our reflections. A lot more will be coming through to you throughout this year and next year, but we definitely welcome this opportunity to have this first kind of discussion on this subject, and perhaps, to draw from your comments, from your ideas, to start our work here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I propose that we keep questions until the end of the session to all speakers. Our next speaker is Katie from the UK communications regulator Ofcom. And I noted one point that Andrea from DG Connect said, that the 2013 e-accessibility study showed a lot of differences in granularity between the member states. So I'm going to ask all three of the regulator speakers in their presentations if they could be clear whether the actions that they're describing, under which heading they've been adopted, are these rules under the universal service obligation? Are they rules under this Article 23A obligation on equivalence of access and choice? Or are they rules under some other heading, for example, perhaps the Audiovisual Media Services Directive? So just so that we can be clear on what is the legal basis being used for intervention by the regulators. So please, Katie.
Thank you very much. So to respond to what James just said, what I'm going to talk about is largely arising from the 2009 Universal Service Directive, but the aspects about choice of undertakings and equivalence of access. But I'm going to get my colleague to jump in and speak briefly about subtitling in particular, which, as was just said, comes under AVMS. So at the beginning of the day, Patricia told us that the really key things from 2009 were about disabled people should have the same choice of undertaking as everyone else, and that they should have equivalence of access to electronic communications. This piece of work I'm going to describe, I would say we used Article 7 of the directive, which says that you shall require special measures in respect of telecom services. We did refer to Article 23, which says you may require special measures of electronic communications providers. And certainly where I live in the UK, the difference between shall and may in legislation is very significant. I guess in the EU as well. So what I was going to talk to you about this morning is arising from the new provisions, we decided that we would look at relay services in the UK. We did research with deaf people and said, what do you like about current services? What would you like to see differently? People told us they valued the relay service, but they also said it was hard to use on the move. They said they didn't like the fact that if a hearing person was making a call to a deaf person, they had to put a prefix in front of the number. And if the hearing person had never heard of the prefix, they couldn't make the call, or they would make the call, but the relay service wasn't there. The deaf person couldn't hear them. The hospital was saying, hello, we'd like you to come in and meet the consultant, and the deaf person would just put the phone down because they couldn't hear and had no relay service. Interestingly, a lot of deaf people also said that they really preferred using mainstream services when they were available. So they said, if my GP was willing to email me or send me a text message, I'd be just as happy with that. But often they're not. And also we like the relay service because it's a real-time call. You know the other person has listened to you, has got your message, has heard your instructions. It's a two-way call. You're not waiting for them to reply. This, just for the benefit of some of the people in the room, this is a picture of quite an old-fashioned looking text phone. When I started my career, they still look like this in the UK. And you would pick up the receiver of the regular phone and jam it into those two rubber cups you can see on the top, and then start typing. And you would hear a noise like a dial-up modem, basically, as the deaf person typed. And as I said, deaf people told us they didn't like text phones very much, so we made them go away. And now you can use text relay in the UK on devices such as smartphones, tablets, laptops, desktop PCs, Macs. I should be clear, you do still need to make a telephone call to use the service, and we came in for a bit of criticism for this. Some deaf people said, why can't we just use this on a web page? Why do we have to establish a phone call as well? There are some quite good reasons for that. One is that for incoming calls, if your computer was closed or in another room, you wouldn't know you had an incoming call. For emergency calls, we can use location information to find where the person is, whether that's a mobile call or a fixed line call. One of the main reasons, though, is so that we can identify the relevant telecoms provider and they can pay for it. And the reason for that is because the directive says that deaf people should be able to be a customer of whoever they want. If there was no way of identifying which telecoms provider you were with, then they couldn't be charged for their customers' use of the service. So that is a consequence of the directive where it says, let's put this obligation on everyone, not just on a universal service provider. So what you do now is download a free app onto your smartphone, your tablet. The service allows people who wish to speak, to use their voice to do so, and to read captions for the text coming back. People who have a little bit of hearing can listen to the call, even if they can't understand the words that are being said. Often people can pick up a lot of information from the tone of voice of the other person. You can hear perhaps if someone's laughing or upset. One of the best things is you no longer need the prefix on incoming calls. So deaf people in the UK can get a new phone number that's a regular looking number, looks like anyone else's. And what that means, say you phoned your physiotherapist to say your back was hurting, they see the missed call from you, they can call you back on that number. They don't need to know the relay service exists to call you, but by dialing your number, the relay service is brought in automatically. So I thought I'd just show you a few things that users in the UK said about this. So these weren't said to us. These were all said on Twitter. So these are unsolicited comments from users. I'll just read out a couple for people who can't see the slide. So here in the top left-hand corner, we have a man called Simon. Now, I've met Simon. He actually has cerebral palsy, and his speech is incredibly hard to understand if you don't know him well. And he says, next generation text relay, utterly amazing. I can reclaim the phone once more. So although relay services are generally used by deaf people, actually Simon is someone who's using it the other way round. He can hear the call, but he types what he wants to say because then he can speak to anyone, and there doesn't have to be someone he knows well who can understand his speech. But the man underneath is deaf, and he says that he called his telecoms provider via Next Generation Text Relay from his mobile phone. He says, couldn't have done this last year, Brill Tech. And then he actually says, oh, and my provider was great too. I don't see anyone from that provider in the room, but I'll mention it to them. What's interesting is, of course, that the people who use this service are always saying, so what's next? What's the next improvement that we can see? And that's obviously their job. To keep those issues in front of us. And one of the things people are saying is, we love the new interface, we love the fact you can use this service on the move, but we find the speed of the captions is too slow because they're produced using typing. And people said, why don't we use re-speaking technology, which is used in the United States, to deliver the captions faster, to make the call flow better? But we are looking into this, but what we think is that if that were to happen, we would have to drop the accuracy, the quality of service measure, quite some way. And I'm just going to ask my colleague to say a few words about this, because it does read across into broadcasting.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? So I'm Jack. I work for Ofcom as well, and I focus on the accessibility of television services, and all of that, as was mentioned, stems from the AVMS directive. Now, re-speaking is the main way through which subtitling is done in the UK, both live subtitling and pre-recorded subtitling. The distinction is quite clear. Live subtitling is mostly done on live programming, such as the news, live sporting events. Sometimes it's done on very topical programming. An example would be a documentary that's been edited a few hours before it's even transmitted. Live subtitling is quite prominent in the UK. The main 5 PSB channels, so the public service broadcasters, have quite big amount of live programming that is being subtitled every year, and continuing concerns about the quality, particularly the accuracy, the latency, and the speed of the subtitling, have led us to consult on proposals to monitor the quality of the subtitling for in a project that's started in 2013, is going to last until the end of 2015. Now, in the slide, you can see a picture of a person re-speaking into the software. It's a speech recognition software, and basically the way re-speaking works, the re-speaker would hear the content that is being, the original speech in the program, would listen to it, and at the same time, simultaneously, so it's a very arduous task, would re-speak it very monotonously and slowly into a microphone. The problem with that is that it creates some latency between this actual speech, the original speech, and the subtitles. Some programs have, in our project, we've measured some latencies as high as 10, 15, 20 seconds, which of course cause distress. Sometimes the subtitling is just not understandable. As I've said, the project started in 2013, and we have so far published 2 biannual reports that look at programming from the main live subtitling providers in the UK. What we have seen so far is that greater collaboration between the broadcaster and the access service providers can really generate some benefits. But these mostly stem from the ability to have running orders, scripts, all kinds of material on which the subtitlers can prepare before they do the subtitling. Something that's honestly a bit more arduous to do in a phone conversation, of course. Some of the issues that we have encountered so far is the potentials of software to improve the quality of subtitling, mostly to contain the speed of the subtitling. Too fast subtitling can be absolutely ununderstandable. And broadcasters have also quite strongly opposed our proposal, our suggestions to experiment with inserting short delays in the transmission of live programming to improve the quality of subtitling. So this is, to be completely honest, this is the first time Ofcom turns to the qualitative aspects of the accessibility of television and access services. But for 10 years, since the enactment of the Communications Act in 2003, Ofcom has focused on and has enforced a code on television access services, which regulates the provision of subtitling, audio description, and sign language on UK television. The targets are expressed as a proportion of total qualifying programming, and you can see in the next few charts how the subtitling has increased substantially. There are about 70 channels providing subtitling in the UK, and about 80% of the hours of those channels are subtitled currently. Audio description, again, about 70 channels providing audio description in the UK, and about 23% actually in 2013 of their programming was audio described, so made accessible for blind users. And finally, in sign language, we have about 16 channels currently doing sign interpretation on their own channels, which means having a sign interpreter in the corner of the screen, and about 5% of their programming is sign interpreted. In addition, since 2009, we've changed the signing obligations to make sure that sign-presented programming is shown on particular sign zones in the on 2 channels in the UK, and these are being currently reviewed to make sure that the sign language users have an increased accessibility to television as well. And since 2014, it's worth mentioning, Ofcom has regulated as enforced the code and access services also on channels licensed by Ofcom, which broadcast in other European countries. So at the moment, about 34, actually it's actually 34 channels broadcasting from the UK to other European countries have to provide subtitling, audio description, and sign language.
Thank you. I just was really keen to ask Jack to speak because I think for lots, especially for deaf users, their two big issues are access to telecoms and access to broadcasting, and there are some crossovers of some of the technology. Do I have time to talk about emergency SMS?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, I know. Just to respond to what was said in one of the earlier presentations, we do have emergency SMS in the UK, so, and visitors to the UK are most welcome to use it. The issue, though, is you have to have a UK SIM in your phone. You can buy these from corner shops, they're very cheap, or you can buy them from a coin-operated machine at the airport or the Eurostar terminal. But not all visitors to the UK will do that. The reason for this is that as the UK regulator, I can only put that obligation on the telecoms providers in the UK that I regulate. We don't have an EU-wide requirement for that service. So to respond to what Rodolfo said, it's not that I don't want people from other countries coming to the UK to be able to use the service. It's to do with the way the directive says that regulators, like the one I work for, can make decisions that are local to their country. And we have made that decision, but because not everyone else has, we can't set up a Europe-wide obligation. I'd really welcome other people's views on this, because nothing would make me more happy. But I've basically done the most I can do under this directive, so maybe that's an issue for the future. Thanks, Chair.
So thank you very much to Katie and to Jack as well. And our next speaker is Corina from the Romanian communications regulator, ANCOM.
Hello everybody, my name is Corina and I'm working for the Romanian regulator, and I'm here today to present you our experience in order to ensure equivalence of access for disabled end users, which is our latest project on this theme. So now I think you all can see me. So this is our project in order to ensure the equivalent access for disabled end users. When we are talking about the equivalence in access and choice of disabled end users, we should start with the evaluation of their real needs. In order to do that, we addressed questionnaires to the electronic communication service providers and some organizations representing disabled people, and we talked to them to find out if their needs could be addressed through the national legislation, whether by taking some measures through the US mechanisms or by imposing obligations to all the providers under Article 23A from the US directive. So during this period of consultation and analysis, we found that the needs of disabled users could not be ensured through the US mechanisms because the majority of disabled users are interested in using the mobile services, and this option could not be covered by designated universal service provider because in Romania, the universal service is not including, the mobile services are not included in the universal service obligations. Following the only option was to elaborate and adopt a decision stipulating a set of measures in order to ensure the equivalent access for these users. So this was happened at the end of the last month on 23rd February. Actually, today came into force this decision. According to our national framework, ANCOM may impose on the providers of public electronic communications networks and of publicly available electronic communication services the following obligations: to regularly inform in a in a comprehensible and accessible manner their disabled subscribers with regard to the services or equipment intended for them. Also, the national framework stipulates that ANCOM shall take specific measures where necessary in order to ensure that the disabled end users have access to publicly available electronic communication services adjusted to their needs and that they benefit from these services under conditions equivalent to those enjoyed by the majority of end users. Furthermore, ANCOM may take specific measures in order to ensure that disabled end users benefit from the choice of providers of publicly available electronic communication services and services available to the rest of end users. So, in view of adopting and implementing specific measures for the disabled end users, ANCOM may encourage the provision to these users of terminal equipment, offering services and functions adjusted to their needs. The decision adopted by ANCOM was split, let's say, into two categories of facilities. Some general facilities on which could benefit all the disabled end users, and some individual or specific facilities, special created for visual, hearing, and or speech impaired people. So the statistical data at the end of last year looks that in Romania there are over 700,000 disabled people, of which over 100,000 persons with visual deficiencies and 23,000 persons with hearing and or speech deficiencies. According to the representative of the Organization of Hearing Deficiencies in Romania, they are expected to use the individual facilities about 10,000 persons, which means a half of all the people having these deficiencies. Some of these facilities have to be implemented by service provider within 6 months, and other ones in 8 months, depending on their complexity of implementation. So the general facilities for all disabled end users contain the right to test the terminal equipment before buying or to return it after buying, in order that the disabled end users could test it in the shop or at home after buying it. Access to information regarding the contractual terms and products via a dedicated section on the web page of the operators. The right of end users to complain to the operator by itself or by a designated third party. And the service regarding priority fault repair. We have some general facilities for speech and or hearing impaired people, which is the access at customer relations services in appropriate manners, including via SMS. And we established some general facilities for visual disabled end users, which are the possibility to interrogate the cost control service by means of an audio message, and the provision upon request and free of charge, of course, of contracts, bills, and promotional materials sent via email in a format compatible with most of the documents readers. So, as I already said, we have some specific facilities. In the decision, we set up these facilities according to the network on which the services are provided, so fixed and mobile. In the case of fixed services, we establish 2 packages. One package for for speech and or hearing persons, persons with these disabilities, which contain unlimited data traffic for €7, including VAT, of course, and a package for end users with visual disabilities, which contain 350 minutes national minutes for €3, and upon request, unlimited data traffic for €7. In case of mobile services, the users with hearing and speech disabilities will be able to choose mobile services packages including at least unlimited SMS on net and 150 national SMS minutes at a tariff of maximum €4 per month, as well as monthly mobile internet traffic of minimum 300 megabits at a maximum download speed of 2 megabits per second. Moreover, these users will be able to buy also fixed service packages including unlimited monthly internet traffic at a maximum download speed of 30 megabits per second, or where this is not technically feasible, the maximum speed available in the commercial offers for the other end users, for residential users. This tariff is €7 per month, VAT included. Also, the mobile service providers will offer to the end users with sight impairments packages containing 300 national minutes for €2 per month, and upon the user's request, monthly national mobile internet traffic of minimum 300 megabits at a maximum download speed of at least 2 megabits per second for €2 monthly. As a specificity of these measures, ANCOM decided to not impose these tariffs. So the providers have to provide these packages containing at least these units at specific tariffs so that the equivalence principle has to be met by them. So the tariffs that I presented you in this slide are mentioned in the decision only as a recommendation from the authority. So the providers can juggle, let's say, with the units included in these packages. In determining these tariffs, ANCOM took into evaluation the results of the market researches developed among disabled end users and the structure of the commercial offers available on the market, as these have been introduced by operators into the ANCOM interactive tariff guide, which is our application for a tariff comparison of the offers in the market. To benefit from these facilities, disabled users have to present to providers the certificate attesting their disability, which is the official document for the authorities in every country, I say. So these are our measures for disabled end users, our recent measures for disabled end users.
Thank you,
Thank
Karina.
you for your attention.
Karina, could I ask just one point of clarification?
Yes.
So these tariffs, does a disabled end user have to pay anything else? So if we take, for example, the first one, the fixed, the unlimited data for €7 per month, is that it? Or does the user also have to pay a line rental fee, any other kind of fee for the broadband subscription? Is it just €7? That's the total charge?
This is the tariff
The
for unlimited data traffic for fixed networks.
Including the subscription?
Yes, yes.
So that's €7 per month for a broadband subscription, basically?
Yes, this is the tariff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce our final panelist, Barbara from the Irish regulator, Comreg.
Yeah, please, that'd be great. Thanks, Katie. Is this working okay? Oh, it is. Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here again to tell you about the measures that we have taken in Ireland in respect of equivalent access and choice. What I would like to do is just to start off by saying that before Article 23 A was established, Comreg had set up a forum where it worked with representative groups from people with disabilities. And the purpose of the forum at that stage was to focus on voluntary measures by undertakings, to look at where the issues lay in the market in terms of detriment or inequality. And we looked at that at the forum since 2005. I suppose after Article 23 was introduced, it created a new catalyst for our forum, because obviously now we could move from a situation whereby we had voluntary measures where we could seek to introduce mandatory measures. So it created an increased focus, an increased energy, and an increased kind of speed of implementation. The membership of our forum, and the reason I'm talking about this is because I think this is very important in terms of being able to understand the experience of disabled end users. And I think that is the challenge, certainly for NRAs. It was a challenge for us and continues to be. So we have, in our forum, the representation are from various groups within Ireland with people with disabilities. The National Disability Authority is the national authority for disabilities. We also have people with disabilities in Ireland, the Disability Federation, and the not-for-profit association, Irish Mental Health Coalition, and the Federation of Voluntary Bodies. Our aim is to cover the range or the spectrum of people with disabilities. I note the speaker earlier from Funka said that users are like unicorns. Of course, we probably can't address everybody's individual needs, but we are hoping to get a representative group there. We also have representatives from electronic communications providers, fixed and mobile broadband providers, and we sit around the table to discuss these matters. We also have our parent department or ministry, the Department of Communications. And some of the measures that have been taken in Ireland, I won't be talking about today because they are the responsibility of that ministry, including emergency services and broadcasting aspects. So I will focus on the measures, I suppose, that where Comreg has a particular remit. Should I just say that in terms of, I suppose, to Article 23A, it talks about equivalent access and choice. So in determining our measures and what the measures that we have brought in, we've thought about or tried to think about what an accessible service should have. And then what we've also done is we've put these measures on all undertakings, not just the universal service provider. So that gives, in our view, the choice mechanism. So on one side, if you bring in certain measures, they will ensure access. But in terms of choice, if it's on everybody, then the end user has a choice because they know that their entitlements are the same, irrespective of which service provider they will choose to contract with. So what we have done is we have introduced measures last year on accessible services in two categories, accessible services and accessible information. And they are free of charge to the end user. And as Katie said earlier, it obviously the people who are mandated with these obligations, i.e. the undertakings, they must pay for whatever additional charges there are to provide these services for disabled end users. So if we take accessible services, what we have mandated on all undertakings is an accessible process to lodge and process complaints and queries. And what that means is, coming back to the Framework Directive and talking about functionally equivalent, it is a real-time service which is equivalent. So if up to now the undertaking had a service which was only a voice call, if you like, obviously that is not accessible for other end users, or if it needed a web inquiry or whatever. So now whatever you need to access the service as a disabled end user, they must provide you with that. It must be functionally equivalent, i.e. have the same response times and have the same outcomes as any other process, complaint process. We also have mandated that staff must be trained appropriately to deal with the requirements of disabled end users. So obviously, when they are dealing with people who have particular requirements, that it's important that the customer service staff understand those so they can deal effectively with that customer. Another accessible service which we've mandated is a top-up facility for prepaid mobile services. And really where this kind of came from, again, it was identified in our forum as an issue of detriment, where people who had hearing issues had to listen to voice prompts to top up using a voucher. And obviously that was not something that was very easy for them to do. They needed another person to help them with it. So we have actually mandated that as well, so that you can pay with credit or debit card or cash using this service. You get a receipt and apply the top up without having to have recourse to voice prompts. And you would receive the value of your confirmation without voice prompts as well. Accessible directory inquiries, I suppose, just to say, we've mandated this, that all undertakings must provide access to directory inquiry services. The universal service provider originally obviously provided this because we had mandated them to do so, but we extended it. In our voluntary work with the forum before Article 23A, we had very good success with this. We got a number of undertakings, both fixed and mobile, 13 I think in number, to actually do this on a voluntary basis without mandating them. And however, with this measure, we copper fastened it and made sure that it was going to be there in the future. And what has happened is the original directory inquiry service that was made available by the universal service provider, many providers are taking that up on a wholesale basis and using it. But we have not mandated that. We've said you can also provide a directory inquiry service using your own service or agents, but as long as you provide one. Accessible billing, I think this is important. It's back to can I access my bill and can I see see and understand the charges, and we have mandated that the bill must be accessible to any particular disabled end user for that undertaking. We also have mandated a facility so that you can register if you wish particular preferences for billing needs. Similar to Karina's measure in terms of testing of terminal equipment, just again this came to the forum. Unfortunately, we were not able to push it through as a voluntary measure, but we since mandated it. And the issue being the issue really that was presented to us was that people with hearing aids in particular, there may be other issues, but hearing aids or cochlear implants coming into a phone shop, and the staff didn't necessarily know whether a particular handset would work for their needs. They weren't allowed to test that handset, and if they did happen to purchase it, hoping that it would work for them, and it didn't, they had no facility to bring it back. So that was presented to us as a problem. So we have a choice. Service providers must either provide a testing facility in their shops with staff who are trained, or else they must have a returns policy so that people can buy it and try it out for themselves and return it if it does not work for their needs. Moving on from accessible information, and again, I'm very interested in the presentation this morning because, yes, we have focused on very much at this stage on a technical accessibility, and I think there are learnings for us in respect of not just, I suppose, technically finding your way around a website with a screen reader, but actually finding the information you need. And I think we can all recognise that there are certain websites whereby we can't find information no matter what our disability or not is. So I think we all have challenges in that respect, and I think that was certainly a takeaway for me from this morning. But we have nonetheless mandated all service providers to provide information on switching contracts, contract notifications and so on in an accessible form to disabled end users. I suppose just other measures. We have created, again, another problem that was presented to us at the forum was whereby disabled end users in some cases have a personal assistant or assistant to help them with their day-to-day business, and many service providers would not deal with that person because they weren't the account holder. So we have implemented a measure whereby you can register a third party to deal with your account on your behalf, and the service providers, once they have received the consent that you wish this person to deal on your behalf for your account, they must comply with that. And with that as well, a register to be able to understand your needs, because there is another particular requirement of service providers, which was already in the directive, which is that they must send out communications regarding the services that they make available, and they must send that out on a regular basis to disabled end users. This register allows service providers to target that communication properly so that I am getting information that is relevant for me rather than information regarding a whole range of things that have no benefit for me at all. So I suppose moving on, they're the measures that we brought in this year. We realise it's an ever-evolving process. We continue to engage with our forum to try and identify the detriment. And I should say we've used BEREC's report in respect of the process, identifying the detriment, understanding where the gaps are and how to fill them. And we've used that. I'm sure there are many measures that we could consider. We have made a start. We have, I think we have received very good feedback on our progress, but we still have other work to do. Our priorities at this stage are to look at a next generation text relay service, and I think Katie's presentation has been very helpful in that respect. In fact, we have liaised up to this to understand the service that has been provided by in the UK, and that service has been presented at our forum in Ireland. So I suppose that's another learning as well for NRAs, to be able to kind of reuse what has been done and the experience from other countries rather than reinventing the wheel. So text relay services is our next priority. We've just issued a consultation in respect of next generation, and we hope to progress that as soon as we can. Another aspect that we're very keen, and again picking up from some themes earlier this morning, that we want to progress is an accessibility statement by service providers. And why we think this is important is because it's one thing to say that they are complying with the measures that we've set out, but it is really important that disabled end users know how they are complying and how they can actually avail of those particular services, because different providers will do things slightly differently. For example, the terminal equipment. Some providers will say, well, we've done it by a returns policy. If it doesn't work for you, you can return the handset. Whereas another provider might do it by saying, we actually have the facility in our shop. So it's important that the customer actually knows this before they engage with that service provider. Same with the top-ups. To provide an accessible top-up that doesn't process that doesn't need voice prompts could be provided in different ways by different undertakings and be equally adequate. But it's important that the consumer knows how it is actually provided and how they avail of it. I suppose the other issue is to do with billing and the complaints procedure. How will the disabled customer know what mechanism or what channel they can use? And I think that the accessibility statement is something that we're looking to progress on in that respect. I just want to point out something, I suppose, just which is important, I think, for NRAs is really, it's about the consultation process and how to, I suppose, get really the views from the various different stakeholders in this. And again, it has been a learning curve for us. We have obviously made our own website accessible, technically at least, and our publications are accessible. We do allow different format submissions, so it's just something to think about. You know, if somebody wants to submit a response to one of our consultations using a voice recording, you know, that's fine, and we welcome it and we encourage it. We get responses from representative groups, the people who are represented at our forum, but we also like to get responses from individuals, and that is a challenge because, you know, people mightn't feel that they, I mean, it's a challenge for regulators anyway, never mind when engaging with disabled end users. So we try to circulate as much information through the disability groups as well to let them know what's happening. We also have, when we have run consultations, we have attended particular venues for disabled communities, and we've presented using various different audio, visual, sign language and so on to try and again encourage, and we've taken submissions on the day. We've actually allowed people to make their consultation response on the day if they wish, and we would record it. So it's trying to, I suppose, get everybody's view when we're considering these measures. Face-to-face surveys and public meetings are other methods we have used. I suppose finally, what I would say is the challenges that I think we have certainly come up against are identifying the equivalence issues. What are they? I mean, we've made a start, but really trying to understand what they are and how they manifest themselves and how we can address them. I suppose, as I said already, another challenge is actually getting inputs from disabled end users and really understanding the experience, which is important. And I think today actually goes a good way to helping us all think about that and understand it a bit better. And I suppose the other thing is statistical information. While it's not, you know, it's not necessary to have statistics on everything, I think another challenge we have is to really get good statistical information in national jurisdictions. Surveys that record disability or self-record, sometimes very difficult to understand what that is saying or representing, and in some cases it's very hard to get kind of recent information as well. So, I mean, there's a number of challenges. We've gone hopefully a good way along the road, and we're continuing to travel on that road, and thanks for listening.
So, thank you very much to our four panelists. You've heard very strong presentations from the panel. You've heard a very clear overview of the EU regulatory framework. You've heard about from the UK regulator about next generation text relay service, and you've also heard about challenges with live subtitling, the quality of live subtitling for TV in the UK. From the Romanian regulator, you heard how for that country, they decided that the universal service obligation is not the appropriate route. And the reason for that is because of the importance of mobile telephony in Romania. And of course, mobile telephony is not covered in the universal service scope. And then finally, from Comreg, you've heard about the role of the Disabled Users Forum in providing input, which the Comreg has used either to drive voluntary or in some cases regulatory measures. So these four presentations have given complementary aspects of this broad issue about implementing equal access for disabled users. So I'd like now to open the floor to all of you, and if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, to start with the lady here, and if you could please start by giving your name and affiliation, please.
Hi, my name is Petra Söderqvist. I work as policy officer at the European Union of the Deaf, EUD. I have a question for Katie Hansen here. You mentioned that the 112 service in the UK is accessible, so I was wondering for deaf sign language users if it's accessible in video calls, and if not, how you're working on it and when you think this will be a possibility for that. And also, because I know in some countries they have it, but they have it up to 20 hours a day or something, so it's not fully accessible, but it's one step further. So thank you.
Shall I answer that now? I think it's fair to say this would be a matter for the emergency services and the government rather than Ofcom as regulator. What's happened in the UK is that the relevant government minister has said that he would like to see businesses and services put video relay in place for the users of that business and that service. Obviously, as someone who works for the regulator, I can't go against what the government minister says, but it's fair to say there hasn't been a great deal of interest in providing this service from the emergency authorities. However, we do now have a couple of good initiatives. The access to the NHS advice line, I believe very shortly will be available by video relay in most parts of the UK, and in Scotland it already is. In fact, the Scottish government, I should say, is running an extended pilot of video relay access to all public services in Scotland, which is one of the 4 constituent parts of the UK. It's a good start. It's all I can say.
Yeah. Hi. Shall I? My name is Sandra, and I work for the Spanish regulator. And I would like to ask for their... Can you hear me?
No, the mic is not working.
No?
Now, yes.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Sandra. I work for the Spanish regulator. And I would like to ask for the Romanian case, how did the regulator manage to calculate a fair price for the services? For the fixed services, I think it was €7, yeah, and mobile services like €4. How the main guidelines to calculate this price. Thank you.
Thank you for asking me. As I already said, we based our tariffs on the application available in Romania for tariffs comparison. So this tariff would be the cheapest tariff in Romania for this service. Yeah? Simple as that.
So, yes, there was a gentleman here at the front.
Thank you. My name is Guido Gables. I'm from the UK. I've been involved in various different roles in this particular debate, so I won't go into that. But I want to come back to the issue of user involvement and some of the issues there. And Barbara, in her excellent presentation, somewhat shot my fox by going into quite a bit of detail on how this is done quite extensively in Ireland. But the kind of one of the key issues in trying to assert, what is important for people and so on, has to do with the level or the quality of disenfranchisement, if you see what I mean. And there is this tension in NRAs to look at, for example, things like mis-selling and other mainstream issues that in terms of absolute numbers would swamp, in terms of the interest you would give to a topic, swamp things like more specialized topics. So what do NRAs do in order to address that particular issue? And is there not a role for BEREC in sharing or acting as a focal point for sharing some of this information about how to involve users, how to consult with users, how to take their views into account? Because we see many differences how this is done or not done across Europe. And there is a big discrepancy in what happens in some countries compared to what happens in other countries.
Yeah, I suppose just to pick up on, if we look at the trend of issues experienced in Ireland by every electronic communications customer, you have contractual issues, you have billing issues and so on. I suppose our approach has been to fix those issues for everybody. And if we can achieve that, then at the same time, we can understand, are there particular issues within those categories that disabled end users are suffering in a different way, if you understand. So, people mightn't understand their contractual terms, or there might be mis-selling. While we're analysing that, if there is a trend or a particular trend about vulnerable users coming out of that, then we would try to tackle that at the same time. But I suppose we have gone and looked at it a different way. We've looked at it, let's have disability groups, let's see what they think and try to, and maybe try and match it with the trends we're seeing ourselves.
Any more questions? Yes, the gentleman here in front.
Hi, I'm Alejandro Moledo, also policy officer from the European Disability Forum, and my question is for the Commission. So Katie was mentioning before that from the NRA's point of view, she would like to have like a EU approach to make possible that persons traveling to the UK are able to use easily the 112 services if needed. So from the Commission side, what can we do at European level to have this European approach to the 112 service, to emergency services? Thanks.
Should I clarify, this is emergency SMS. There are arrangements for the voice service.
Thank you for the question. Can you hear me? Okay. Of course, Katie just mentioned the SMS, but the question of access to emergency services is much wider, because we see, first you have the layer of the spectrum of disabilities, and then you have the layer of how particular national emergency authorities cope with these disabilities in respect to having their operator assistance centres equipped to the responses. So it's a very complicated process. Of course, we have started now really with the 2009 review to really set out the obligation to have access for disabled end users to the 112. You have to kind of understand that we're coming from the situation where I remember back in the days, around 2005, 2006, I think we had around, and this may be not an accurate number, around 15 infringement proceedings against member states to even establish a 112 number as such. Then we were working really hard on the co-location aspect, and now there's a lot of work being done in COCOM, in the subgroup of COCOM, which is the communications committee that we work with member states, on how to include the kind of disability aspect onto it. But again, as I was saying, we're just now starting to reflect again how we could make the European rules better. And certainly 112 is going to be one of the important issues we're going to look at when we are going to try to revise and refit the Universal Service Directive. So I cannot really give you an answer now. Perhaps, you know, there's a lot of different interests. I'm sure that certain groups of disabled end users would like to see video relay service, you know, all over Europe. Then again, we come to the question of languages. How do you really make sure? I mean, this is not just for the disabled end users. This is for your general public. You know, how do you make sure that a Lithuanian traveller calling an emergency service in Slovakia actually gets through in an understandable way, unless both parties speak English. So, you know, these are issues we're going to consider, but at this stage, for sure, it's a bit too early to give you more kind of clear hints where we're going to head.
And Andrea, could I just follow up on that? So, what is the vehicle for that? Is that the review of the whole telecom framework that will start in 2016, or would this be something that would be done sooner than that?
Perhaps just to explain to you a bit more of the process, especially for those who are not within the NRAs, who are not really dealing with these kind of EU policy issues every day. We have now started really to the first reflections of the telecoms framework, the whole package, the whole five directives. With the new Commission, as you know, perhaps the digital single market is one of the flagship initiatives that they want to kind of follow through within the mandate of this Commission, and the revision and refit of the telecoms framework fits into this. So once we have the digital single market strategy out, we're hoping that, I mean, the timing is a bit lucid now, but we're hoping around summertime we can have some sort of a first public consultation on the issues. This will be followed by a green paper, which of course is going to be consulted again, and perhaps hopefully throughout the course of 2016, there will be proposals for the revision of the whole framework. So this is not just going to be a separate exercise for 112 or universal service. The review of universal service, which is usually done as a separate exercise, independently of any revision of the framework, because there is actually a requirement from the framework to review the scope of universal service every 3 years. We have decided that instead, and the last one was done in 2011, so we have decided to actually not to separate those two, because the timing is a bit, would be a bit funny if we split it out. So we decided to do it together. So the revision of the whole framework is going to incorporate also a proper review of the universal service as such. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ilona Stankevichne from Regulatory Authority of Lithuania. I would like to ask about an approach to payphones adopted to disabled end users, and is it still actual, or it is history already? And from Andrea Bodova and another country's practice, of course.
Sorry, the exact question for public payphones was?
We are going to decrease payphones in our country, and still we're not sure about the speed of that. So what is an approach to that payphones? Is this still actual for?
I mean, maybe perhaps what I can comment from my side is that whether under the framework this is allowed or not. I mean, of course, with public payphones, as it was mentioned already before by other speakers, the significance of the public payphones is declining, and in fact, even the revision of the framework in 2009 reflected on this and realized, okay, that the technologies are moving. So basically, even though public payphones are still included as one of the elements, one of the components of universal service, there is a specific provision of the framework which says that if the NRA is satisfied that the services provided by other or comparable means, they don't have to designate really, or they don't have to put specific obligations to provide public payphones. And if, in fact, I think it's around 6 countries we've seen that they have relaxed the universal service obligations related to public payphones completely. And even more recently, I think it's Belgium actually, that the traditional public payphone provider has decided to dismantle all phone booths completely. Of course, in the reality is that in many instances, even if without the universal service obligations, the public payphones continue to exist in areas where this is commercially profitable, meaning airports, you know, kind of railway train station, hospitals, you know, places like this, but even without the obligation. But the reality is that they are being dismantled now. The question is, what is the cost, you know, whether it's more costly to actually put them away or to keep them in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can say something if you like. I mean, we still have an obligation on the universal service provider to provide uneconomic payphones, and there are obligations about those. One is 70% and one is 75%, and I can't remember without looking it up. But they have to have extra amplification equipment so that for someone using a hearing aid, there's better compatibility, and also a proportion of public call boxes in the UK have to be accessible to wheelchair users. But we are finding that nobody uses these public call boxes anymore, regardless of whether they're disabled. So, as has just been said, often taking them away can be just as expensive as leaving them. So, what's happened in the UK in some cases is the telecoms equipment is removed, and then the booth sometimes stays in place and is used for things like displaying tourist information leaflets or for a community book swap, because a lot of the booths in the UK are very distinctive, traditional red cast iron, and people like them. They see them as having heritage value, and that's fine, but that's nothing to do with universal service.
There was an article a couple of years ago in the Financial Times. A journalist spent a day in central London observing one payphone box and how it was used. And as Katie said, very few people actually went in there to make a call from the public payphone. No, they didn't go in there to get cards either. But the most common use was people going inside to make mobile phone calls because of the street noise. So I think there was a hand somewhere at the back. Yes, there's a lady at the back.
Hi, my name is Georgia, and I work for the Cyprus NRA, OCPR. I had a question regarding the funding of the impositions. I understand if it's universal service and it's fixed telephony, it is funded through a universal fund. Now, is it funded? Because I understand there's some administrative and other expenses for the providers that have the impositions for mobile telephony and other. Is it funded somehow, or is it sunk cost for the providers and absorbed by other services?
Just from, I suppose, Ireland's perspective, we have had a trend of moving the universal service obligations that are on the universal service provider onto everybody if we feel that they are appropriate anymore. And in doing that, obviously then it comes out of the universal service funding issue which you recognise. But in terms of our regulatory impact assessment for those measures, the ones that we have introduced, we have come to the view that it was proportionate to put the measures on the undertakings, and they will take the cost themselves to provide those measures. You know, we've conducted our regulatory impact assessment, and the benefit for the end users compared to the potential cost for the service providers, we feel is proportionate in this case. I mean, there could be other measures that come to the forum that we wouldn't consider were proportionate, but to date the measures that we have imposed mean that the undertakings have to satisfy the cost themselves.
Can I just say, a fund is an allowed instrument under the directive, but I think traditionally that would be more where, to go back to the earlier question from the Vodafone representative, if you only required the universal service provider to provide services to disabled people, for example, and then made the other telecoms provider contribute to the cost of that. But I think that the 2009 directive moved away from that and said it's better that disabled people should be able to be a customer of whoever they choose, and obviously and particularly in mobile. So now in the UK, and I think in a number of other countries, the costs lie where they fall. So each telecoms provider pays the cost of their customers' use of services such as text relay, free directory inquiries, priority fault repair, and so on. But just to answer what was said earlier by the questioner from Vodafone, is it better for things to be provided by one provider? I think we've generally agreed not always. The only thing I'd say about this, though, is in the UK, we used to have an obligation on BT to provide the text relay service, and that was a way of ensuring that there was at least one. Now we've moved away from that. We deleted that obligation, and we just said every single provider has to do this. They must give access to a service. But that left us without the guarantee that such a service existed. Now, you can say, if it doesn't exist, you have to go out and commission it and pay someone else to build it and provide it. But that it does leave something to chance, this model. Because if no one wished to enter that market and provide a text relay service, you could end up with disabled people being left without a service. What's happened in the UK is that BT said, we will build this new upgraded service, we will continue to be the provider, and we will allow our competitors to have access to it at cost price, which is quite an efficient way of providing it. But BT, we can't make BT do that. And if BT said, no, we're not prepared to sell time on our system to our competitors, then we would end up with a real problem with very small providers, telecoms providers, saying, I can't go out and commission something costing millions and millions and millions of pounds when I only have 2 people on my books who've indicated they want to use it. So the model we're using does rely on a bit of goodwill.
Nathalie Dumont from the Belgian regulator. Yeah, thank you. Nathalie Dumont from the Belgian regulator. I've got a question about that access model Katie talked about. Do you regulate the actual cost? Do you evaluate the cost? Is it really cost priced, or do you have some comments from operators using it that the price charged by BT it was that built it is actually too high? How does it work? Thank you.
We don't regulate that price. We've because we don't have wholesale price regulation in the UK, and this is essentially a wholesale product that the former universal service provider is selling to its competitors. But what we have done is said we would approve alternative services if they could meet the quality standards that we have set. So if BT was charging a price that was completely unreasonable as far as its competitors were concerned, they could, if they wanted to, collectively go out and commission an alternative service. And that's the only way that they would be able to get the service potentially cheaper. But in reality, the call centre that provides text relay, at quiet times, in the early hours of the morning, there are only 2 people on duty. So to have a second service running in parallel wouldn't be particularly efficient. And it is in BT's interest to recover its sunk costs by selling time on its own system to its competitors. So there's a bit of check and balance there. But ultimately, you're quite right. It's not a price we regulate.
think Barbara just wants to...
Just finally, there's another example of that as well, and it's a simpler example, which is the directory inquiry services, because originally the universal service provider provided the accessible directory inquiry services. We've mandated everybody to provide that, and they have naturally, through market forces, as Katie says, they have naturally gone to the universal service provider and bought the service. But equally, and I admit it is much simpler than text relay and much easier to provide, but they could equally go and create a model themselves, and indeed sell it if they wanted to other people. So you know, I think there are a few models whereby it can work. There probably could be issues arising, but we'll see.
Thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to have to draw this very interesting discussion to a close. Please can I ask you to join me in thanking our five panellists